Hi, I'm Mara Webster with In Creative Company, and today I'm so thrilled to be talking to the wonderful Moses Ingram all about her role in Lady in the Lake. And one of the first things that I wanted to talk about was your journey into this role, because when you got the audition, it sounds like it was
Mhm.
basically a case of, we need you to tape this today and read the scenes and do all the character work. And then the
Yeah,
next day you were meeting with Alma Harrell and kind of talking about things, and you went into shooting and into production very quickly because they were already 100 days into shooting.
yeah,
And I love how the fact that you just instinctively connected with this character really helped you in terms of that approach. And so I wanted to ask about just that feeling of connection that you had with the character and how that really helped you to navigate through the way that you had to work and jump into this project.
yeah. I think a few things, like in large part, I think the first thing that jumped off the page was the writing. Reading can be so hard sometimes because it's like you're still trying to find your way into whatever thing you're reading. And so it just was something that I really couldn't put down. And then it being in Baltimore, I'm from Baltimore, it was just like, I don't know, just innately like a woman that I could feel. I feel like in this life, there's some things that are just like made for you to get out there and go do. And that was totally one of those for me.
And you didn't have all of the scripts and the entire arc for Cleo when you first started
I did
filming either.
not. When I first started filming, I literally had only read the first episode for a while. And things were, not shot in order. And so Alma would always come over and be like, okay, you just gotta trust me. There's a little bit of this and a little bit of this, and you need a little more of this, and that'll, have it. And, looking back at the show, like knowing all that I know, I'm just, really amazed and super, super proud of it because yeah, I guess it could have gone anyway, but I think it went pretty amazing. So that's great.
I love how much of an asset Alma was in kind of sitting and talking through everything, because
Yeah.
one of the other aspects I wanted to ask you about as well was, for the first few weeks, the fact that you were also shooting the big cigar at the same time and flying
Mhm.
back and forth as if the rest wasn't enough. And so what was that experience in, stepping into this entirely new project where you didn't have as much time to kind of sit
Mhm.
and do research and develop in the way that you usually would, and having to jump between these two characters at the same time as well?
Yeah. I definitely gratitude, what I would say is the first thing. I so long had dreamed of being able to be, working as much as that. And so it really wasn't like a hassle. Like I was tired, but it was good. You know what I mean? And I haven't been working at this level for very long. I think it's been like 6 years now. But in my life, I've been doing this for 20 years. So I think there are some things that you just you instinctively can do once you've done it for so long. Not to minimize it, I think acting is hard, but I also train for it and, muscle memory after a while for some things.
And in building out this character, she has so much ambition and drive, and obviously she has a really specific idea at the beginning of the show of how she wants to get there, and that's
Mhm.
working for a local politician that she's volunteering for. And if I can just get her to give me the job, then that's going to change everything. And when that doesn't happen, it really untethers her in a lot of ways. And so, how did that create a real dynamic shift in the character for you, and the way that that leads to all of the choices that she makes the rest of the series?
Yeah, I think she had one good card left, and that was it. I think Cleo, from the very beginning, was hanging on by a thread, and when that thread was cut, I think it was a scrambling. I don't even think she necessarily knew what she would do or if she would go through with whatever her plan was. And I think that's one of the most interesting things in playing Cleo is I know I'm playing a woman who doesn't exactly know what her next move is, but is trying to figure it out in action. And that was just really interesting to play.
Even though, like you said just now, she doesn't necessarily know what her next move is going to be, did you think of her as someone who has a really strong sense of who she is? Because there's a lot of assertiveness in her personality and kind of who it feels like she knows she is to the people around her.
I think that was one of the things that probably threw her for a loop too. I think she thought she knew and then realized maybe I don't so much. And then deciding who she wanted to be, you know? I think it's a mixture of those three things. Yeah.
I love that answer. I wanted to ask you about just finding the energy of her as a character as well, because she has such a drive to her. You know, it's not even just, oh, I need to have a job to support my family while my husband's waiting to see if he gets another comedy gig. You know, she's working days as a mannequin at, you know, human mannequin at the department store, then she's working at the club at night. And we see how she doesn't just do the bare minimum. She's always doing 10 different things for everyone around her in that space. And
Yeah.
so was that something that you kind of were able to connect to and found really shaped her energy?
Oh, definitely. Because sometimes when you're moving so fast, there's no time to feel or process, you know. I mean, I think there are a lot of people in this life who can, sort of identify with, 1,000 things in my life are going wrong, but I really need to pay this bill. And so I'll focus on that thing if I can just get through this week. And, I think a lot of people, including Clea, are like, if I could just get through this week, but then, when you get through the week, another week is starting. So you never really get the opportunity to sort of land, I guess, anywhere.
Yeah. And I was curious about, you know, how you approach the dynamic in her marriage, because the first time we see her going back to the house, it's her husband has his buddies around and she's kind of like, "Oh, this is what always happens. I'm always the person that has to pick everything up." And there's a conversation at one point where she's like, "I'm trying to bring us up, but I need you to also do this."
Mhm.
But then we also get to see the sweet vulnerable side, the kind of humor that they share and what connected them and made them fall in love. So it's, you know, this real kind of push and pull of a very complicated relationship with a lot of history between the two of them.
Yeah. I think the thing that I latched on to with the two of them is I imagine a lot. I do a lot of imagining. I just imagine that this is someone she met when she was 16, and has loved in a really innocent way. And life comes at you fast, and then it's not so innocent anymore. And you have people who need to eat and need a place to live, and so I think the sweetness sometimes is in spite of herself, honestly. It's not something she necessarily wants to do or feel, but, sometimes, people have that effect on you, I guess.
Yeah. And did the backstory in terms of her parents and that entire dynamic that existed in the later scripts kind of really give you a lot of her motivations as well? Because we kind of really see her as someone who doesn't want to repeat the same cycle that her parents did and wants to find how she can create a different cycle for her kids.
Definitely. And I think there's a lot of she doesn't want to prove them right. I think a lot of people told her what her life would be, what it does not have the potential to be. And if she didn't do X, Y, Z, then certain things will happen. And I think certain things in her life, are happening. And she doesn't want them to be true. So I think that's also a fire under her ass as well. Having to stay with her mom right now anyway is like, you know, but yeah, trying not to prove them right, let's say.
Yeah. And you know, in the backstory that we see from when she was younger as well, we also see a lot about her relationship with her dad. And, you know, her dad was the one running the numbers game that her son is now, you know, constantly finding himself
Yeah.
pulled into. And there's a moment where, as a kid, Cleo was like, "Wait, I've got some money that I've been saving up. Here, I can help you out." And it kind of really struck me that she was someone who's always kind of had to be much more adult and has always known a lot more about what's going on around her than people have necessarily given her credit for. But did you think
Mhm.
that that in turn ended up being one of her biggest attributes and one of her assets in life as well?
Hmm. I mean, I'm sure in some ways. I think, having to grow up so soon sort of removes the ability to sort of like lean into life and the freedom, which I think is something she ends up really craving at the end. She looks at Dora, her best friend, who, though very addicted, is living the life that she desires to live in this moment. She looks at Slap. Slap seems happy with his life. I mean, these are the two people that are closest to her that choose themselves, and that's okay for them. And I think that sense of duty that she has, um, you know, removes that freedom that she so desires.
Yeah. And speaking of that idea of freedom for her, I love this scene where she dances in the club and just kind of lets
Yeah.
everything out. And I wanted to ask you about the song choice because that was something where Alma Harral actually came to you and said, "Is there a particular song that really resonates with you for the idea of this?" And so, how did you end up landing on the Nina Simone song "Sea Lion Woman"?
You know, it's just a song that I've always just been so curious about. Naturally, like Dominique Morisseau is a wonderful playwright, and she had this play called Sunset Baby that was going up in New York years and years and years ago, and I couldn't afford to see the play. But there was like a 10-second clip, and that was the song, and I was just obsessed with it. I was just like, I don't know. And knowing the play, having read that play, I was like, it connected to the kind of woman that that character was, which I don't know. I don't know. It's just something that just it feels right, and it just felt right, I guess.
You just know when it's the right song and the right
You
connection.
just know when it's right.
Yeah.
And that's one of my favorite parts about working too is the ways in. You know, some characters you're not blessed to have a way in, but you know, Cleo, super blessed, you know, and music is a large piece of how I work. And so finding the right songs, the things that open you up, um, you know, get it right on your skin so you can sort of be in the moment.
I also wanted to ask you about working with choreographers to put together that whole sequence because it's something that's so uninhibited, but yet, you kind of have to have such a clear idea of what is this scene going to be and what is the
Mhm.
movement that's best going to express where she's at. And
Yeah.
so, what was that experience in working with the choreographers that you worked with on that scene?
Yeah, ICL was amazing. Um, You know, me myself, I'm a very shy person. I'm kind of awkward. And so when we went to rehearse it initially, I was like, yeah, yeah, like everybody can come to the room. It's like, it's fine. And then we started and I was like, oh my gosh, I feel actually kind of naked. Can everybody leave? Like, I'm so sorry. Like, I thought I would be okay with it, but I'm like, you know, and working, all of the dancers around me were actually so patient and understanding, you know, how vulnerable you need to be to sort of like let yourself be so loose. Um, yeah. And I feel like that experience was something that sort of broke through for me personally that I carry with me now. Yeah, it means a lot to me. Yeah.
It's also such a great scene and such a powerful moment for Cleo because there's this like releasing of anger and, kind of an FU to it. And at the
Huge.
same time, there's something really heartbreaking and sad about watching someone that's trying to discover a feeling and trying to attain something, but she doesn't know what it is yet or how to get it in life. And so how did you find that juxtaposition of like those two different like emotions that are so heavy at different points for her?
I understand it. I don't know if it's necessarily to that magnitude. But that feeling of like, I don't know what I'm supposed to do next. I don't know what my next move is. I know I need to do something, but I don't know what it is. And so you sort of mill and seed through life until you happen upon something, a seed of something, or, you know, yeah, it's hard. A rock in a hard place, actually.
Yeah. I've also heard you talk extensively about how music is always such an important way into characters. And I wanted to ask about just like kind of building out that playlist, but also working with a director like Alma, where music
Oh,
is
you have a
so.
kitty cat?
I do. Say hi.
It's a kitty cat. Very cute.
But also working with Alma, where music is such a big part of, okay, buddy, how she works as well. Um, and I even love that, like I heard you talking about the song Adele, My Little Love, where it's such a song about I'm trying to be a parent to you, I'm trying to do all the things right, but I'm still figuring this out. So like please have some patience with me.
Yeah.
And I thought that was such a beautiful way to encapsulate the idea of everything that Cleo's trying to do.
Yeah. It's that song in particularly I think is a great example of like, you know, when artists create from an authentic place, you can feel it and it breaks through and it pierces. And I think that's the thing that I'm after in my work is soul and feeling and it just is so honest. I think I would compare it to, people spend hours listening to interviews. I think music is sort of the same thing. You're experiencing people's same energy, just in a different medium, I guess. But yeah, I love it. It's my favorite thing.
One of the scenes that I wanted to ask you about as well was the scene where Cleo is doing the job for Shell at the club, and she's kind of
Hmm.
found out there's a price to pay beyond what you even thought there would be for the things that you want. And there's that moment where when the first guy opens up the apartment door and has her come inside, you can kind of see that she's immediately like, I know I'm way over my head in this moment. And once she's inside and they lock the door, there's this real sense of her trying to project a lot of strength, but also not feeling that way. And so I just wanted to
Yeah.
ask about how you went into that scene.
Yeah, I think definitely, fight or flight kicks in. I think that's what she saw. I think she knew it was dicey before she went in and you fuck around, you find out. And she sure enough did. Um, but yeah, I think it's just the fear. And then with that fear, knowing that you gotta get out of the room. But, she didn't really get out of the room.
Ended up getting in the car.
Ended up getting in the car, unfortunately.
Well, the car sequence feels very different to that because, obviously the stakes become much higher very quickly, and she ends up in a position of, there's a gun being held on someone in the back seat, and then she sees exactly what is being pieced together in front of her. And we do see the fear at that moment. And was that idea of she is going to be vulnerable enough and scared enough that the fear is going to immediately show at this point something that you had a sense of straight away? Or did you have different ideas of what that scene might look like for her along the way?
No, I think for me, I just sort of thought, at that point when you're in the car, you don't necessarily know, like because it's actively happening, you don't know where you're going. It's like, okay, we're gonna kill Myrtle Summer. That's awful. Are they gonna kill me next? What's gonna happen to the children? This like long barrage of thoughts that you can't really make sense of any. And then you kind of end up back at why the fuck did I do this anyway? You know what I mean? So. Yeah.
And we kind of see the fallout of that, and just the stress and the anxiety that kind of follows in all of the scenes after
Mhm.
that. What were a lot of the changes that you found? Because, the scene where she's sitting on the stool filming the video piece for Myrtle, and then she lashes out at someone that tries to remove her from the stool, feels like
Mhm.
something that she wouldn't have done prior to that incident. And there's so many little details like that.
Yeah. I just feel like, you know, Cleo had been in a lot of positions where people tried and tested her, and, her in her innocence of heart, thinking that these things, these, you know, small transgressions on behalf of people were things that, she could look over. And then, that moment of realizing, oh, actually it doesn't matter to anyone. It doesn't matter to anyone what I feel, why everyone is taking care of themselves. Then I must do the same thing, I think is the thing that happens.
And it's that idea of I'm taking care of myself, but also there's so much of her that's taking care of her sons and especially her kid that's really sick. And um, I was interested in kind of your perspective on the way that religion plays a huge part in that, because she has the Reverend come over and, when she's asking him, is there anything we can do for this disease that doesn't have a cure? His answer is, you need to donate as much money as you can. And how much are
Yeah.
you willing to sacrifice? And the answer is, whatever she can. And so from your perspective, kind of how did religion really play a huge part in all of the choices that she ends up making after that?
Yeah, I mean, religion I won't say all, but in a lot of Black households is huge. And I think Cleo had already reached a point where she, didn't have the most faith in it, right? But no risk, no reward. And she realized that this is the one thing I haven't tried. They say, you tried everything, try Jesus. Cleo said, okay, let's give it a go. And then to have someone uh equate the life of her son to money, which is very disrespectful. And it's like the idea that a person so awful could be a representation of God. Who is that God? And I think that's sort of, what that thread was.
And when she then first goes to the hospital and meets Maddie, Natalie Portman's character,
Mhm.
you know, she has this instant idea of who Maddie is, and the thing that kind of really struck me was how she understands that sense of ambition. I know that you're not going to stop writing about me. You're going to write the story about how I'm actually still alive unless I give you something else and something better. And
Mhm.
did you think that a lot of that came from just she has that same sense of ambition and drive, and it's just seeing this kindred spirit in someone else and really understanding it?
I actually don't think she thinks her and Maddie are anything
Yeah.
alike at all. I think on the outside, I definitely could look at the two of them and see things that are similar. But I don't think there's a world in which Cleo even says it at the end, like, why would we be friends? How would we be friends? That doesn't even make sense. They're experiencing life in two totally different ways. And I think Cleo appeals to Maddie's entitlement. And she sees an in and decides to take it, and that's the way she goes about it.
And then when you have all those scenes where Cleo is having to dress in disguise and essentially appear as a guy to go into the club,
Yeah.
I love that whole sequence because it's just like such different mannerisms and even just the way you're moving through scenes. It's as someone who has to not be noticed, but also not draw attention and not be noticed.
Hmm.
So how did you kind of step into that side of playing Cleo when she's going to the club undercover?
Yeah, that was fun. That was a lot of fun to do. We affectionately named that character Jimmy. Um, and it was just the lengths that you'll go to save you and yours. Um, yeah, I feel like that's a bad answer, but I think that I think that is my answer. Yeah, what you'll go through for the people that you love, those people being her sons.
No, absolutely. It totally makes sense.
Yeah.
Um, one of the other sequences in the final episode that I love is that moment, or sorry, I think it was episode 6, the moment where Maddie has all of her subconscious visions, and then Cleo appears, kind of like rising up out of the fountain, and it's the place where the body was left in the water as well. And how was that a totally different experience to the kind of musical dance number that you'd had earlier in episode 3?
Because it's Maddie's imagined versus Cleo's reality. I think too, just from a technical standpoint, like I'm in the ring, but I have no control over what's happening, the pace at which I'm being lifted. And so you sort of gotta, I guess, give over to it, you
Yeah.
know? But yeah, I would say definitely that difference, the biggest is it being Maddie's story versus mine and how Maddie's mind is telling it for her, I guess.
Absolutely. And then, the space that we find Cleo in at the end of the series is, in Paris, super far away from Baltimore, and she's taking to the stage performing under Dora's name because that's the identity that she's assumed.
Hmm.
And I love how it ties back to what you were saying earlier of Dora being someone that she looks at and she's like, this is someone who, even if they're not doing it all right, they seem really content with what they're doing in life and a lot of the choices that they've made. And so what was kind of your idea of how she ends up and the way that it kind of ties back to this want that she's always had?
I mean, she certainly gets it to some extent. But you got to give something to get something. And it definitely did not come to her without great cost. You know what I mean? Because people should be able to experience, that freedom in their actual lives as themselves. And I think so many of us don't get to do that, don't get the opportunity to do that. And so, um, yeah, it came at great cost, but I think I'm happy for how it turned out for Cleo.
And after you were shooting Lady in the Lake, you also went on to make the film The End, which is musical.
Mhm.
And since Lady in the Lake had been the first time that you had sung on screen, on stage in that way, how did the experience of that really help you when it came to making a film like The End? Because there's so many musical elements along with the character development in that.
Yeah. It was useful, but it was different because the end, like, it's me singing, right? It's my voice, but it's not like stylistically, it's more of a reformed version of singing that I don't necessarily do or did not do up until that point, save a musical theater class or two. And so sort of trying to, with Lady in the Lake, I was able to sing in my voice in a way that, was natural to me. Um, but, sort of adapting something else for the end and what the sound and vision of that project was. Very, very hard work to sing at the level that we had to sing for the end. A lot of work, but I would say, I guess Cleo was a nice sort of precursor to it.
And I've heard you say that, the experience of working with Alma on Lady in the Lake kind of was really transformative because you were working with a collaborator that really valued your input and your
Mhm.
contributions and ideas in so many ways. And even just the character kind of taught you to take ownership of your work in a different way. And so I just wanted to ask about the experience of that and how you feel like it's been really transformative for you.
Yeah, I think from the time I finished that, and it's been so long now, I think that was 2022. Um, I haven't been the same person since, you know. I I've always known the kind of artist I am and, how I like to approach work and what's important to me. But to be able to actually put, potential on paper and, exercise that is really, really a beautiful thing. And I learned a lot about myself. There are a lot of days where I was like, I don't know if we're gonna get this done, if I can do it. What if I'm not the person? And then in the midst of that fear and pushing through, you get to the other side of it. And that's been a huge lesson in my life and, affects the way that I do have done everything since.
I love hearing that because it's such a beautiful performance, and I love that we got to see you in this series. So
Thank you so
congratulations and thank you
much.
so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. This is fun.